Thank you for tuning in to NuTinni Gaming. This is DWL52 and you are watching Star Fox Dark, a D&D game. Hello everyone and welcome to the 7th episode of Star Fox Dark, a D&D game. I'm your host, DWL52. In the last episode, the group finally got back to the pilot academy and are investigating what happened when we come across two new NPCs that ended up joining our group, Ashe and Bob. Funny thing is, nobody in the group understood that this was a reference to the game Overwatch, as nobody but our DM has actually played that game, which was sad since usually anybody who gets his references gets a special reward. So, anyways, back to the game. Once Monty is able to get back up and walk again, he is very insistent that we go to the hangar and check on his walker. If you remember, his walker was a biomechanical construct that needed to be fed once every 4 hours, and we had been gone effectively almost the entire day. Now, I can't remember if this planet has a 26-hour day or 24-hour, but either way, we were gone the entire day. So, we gathered together the duffel bags and head off to the hangar. We walk in through a set of double doors into the hangar bay, and it looks almost completely untouched. We start walking around toward the security section where Monty's walker is supposed to be, and we hear this disgusting slurping, chomping sound, kind of like somebody munching on grossness. Anyways, we turn around this corner and recognize what's left of the upper torso of the head mechanic laying on the ground, being torn apart by the walker. Lilly, Thesia, Ashe, and Psyduck all make a shock gasp sound, and Monty goes, "Oh no." All of this alerted the walker to our presence. It leans out, it picks its head up from its feeding, and turns towards us. We all draw our weapons and prepare for what's next. When it turns towards us, it has mutated, which is really the best way I can describe this, as it is now mostly bloody flesh with bits of metal sticking out, effectively a horror version of Pac-Man with legs. Where the cockpit door was is now a large mouth filled with bone and jagged teeth. It slurps down an arm that was sticking out of its mouth like a spaghetti noodle before screaming out, "Waka waka!" and charging at us. Jax and Farah both throw grenades at this monstrosity. Well, Farah rolled a critical and ends up throwing her grenade into its mouth. When it goes off, it temporarily stuns this thing. So the group scatters, and we all end up making a beeline for the main base, and we think that it can't get into the main base because of its large size. That turns out not to be the case. So when the grenade went off, what ended up happening was this thing kind of went into a berserk mode, and it started screaming out, "Waka, waka, waka, waka!" And it started blasting through concrete, kind of like wet paper. Like, it was just smashing holes into the building here. So we all haul ass back into the main base, and this thing ends up going through the hangar walls and starts going around the base. It's constantly screaming "Waka" and tearing shit up. Now, we can't actually see this, but we come to find out later that there was still a bunch of Andrazi forces there that were hiding. And they kept trying to jump us, but every time they went to go jump us, either Jax or Bob came walking out and scared him off. Well, this giant Pac-Man of death ended up finding them, and so while we were all sitting in the med bay, all of a sudden we start hearing gunshots and screaming, and more gunshots, and more screaming, before it all just goes quiet. So at this point, Jax comes to realize that anybody who was still at this base was not, in fact, part of the CDF, and so that was probably enemy forces getting taken care of, which makes him happy. However, they do need to come up with a plan to get out of here before this giant Waka Waka thing comes back and just eats them. And so what they ended up coming up with very quickly was the group is going to split up into two different groups. The first group is going to go and get onto our transport, which is outside, and take off. And hopefully this thing cannot fly after us. The other group is going to try and haul ass to the fighters. And even though that they are training fighters and don't really have the best weapons or the best mobility, we can at least try to use them to take this thing out, or subdue it, or break it, or whatever the hell it is we need to do to get away from this damn thing. So we all kind of gather our shit and make a haul to the hangar bay. Well, unfortunately, the character or player who played as Monty had a issue with us trying to kill his walker, which I kind of understand. But at the same time, this thing has already mutated and has already killed a person. It obviously now has a taste for flesh, and it's probably just completely slaughtered that entire Eldrazi combat force. We probably cannot kill this damn thing on our own. We might be able to, but the chances are slim to none. And he kept arguing that he can save it, he can turn it back to our side, and eventually came down to all of us, including our DM, saying, look, man, this thing has a taste for flesh. We've got a child with us who we're trying to protect. Do you really want to risk this child and potentially other players over a piece of mechanical suit that you can rebuild? And eventually it came down to somebody flat out saying, dude, you ever seen that movie Pixel? Do you remember what happened to Toru Iwatani? I can never pronounce his name properly, and I apologize for that. Where he's like, oh no, I can totally save him. This is not him. He's a good boy. Walks up and then the thing bunches on his arm. Yeah, that's going to be you, except it's going to just devour your entire body, and you're going to have to create a new character. So either get in the transport with us or die. Sorry. So before we make a break for the transports and whatnot, we decided that we're going to split the group in two. And what's going to happen is Farah, Deeze, and Chocolate are all going to make a beeline for the fighters section. And Farah is going to get into her advanced R-Wing, and which is actually going to be the most powerful thing here. While Deeze and Chocolate jump into fighters called Lazy Leafs. Lazy Leafs are kind of wide, not the most agile, not the most speedy, and really don't have the best of weapons. But it's definitely better than sitting on the ground waiting for this thing to come at you and trying to shoot it with ground weapons. The rest of us are all going to try and make a beeline to a transport, and we're actually going to try and find two of them that works. One is outside, which we came in, and the other one we're going to try and find inside this hangar bay. Now, the reason why we want to take two is because when we go to the North City, we find the cadets, we want to be able to get them transported out of there without having to walk out or find another form of transportation. Well, we walk out into the hangar bay thinking that this Waka Waka thing is on the other side of the base, and we immediately start hauling ass to the various ships that we want to get into. Not even 30 steps in, and the door behind us explodes open, and here comes the walker, and it is pissed. It is covered in blood, it's gored, it's got new bullet holes in it. It is not happy. But it spins, starts looking around, finds us, yells Waka Waka, and starts charging at us. Great. So Ashe ends up grabbing Thessia, Psyduck, and starts hauling ass to the transport with Bob covering her. Jax turns to Lilly and basically tells her to follow, but Lilly really doesn't. She just basically takes her hammer, puts it into the grenade launcher mode, and proceeds to rain down fire onto this walker. Well, Farah, Deeze, Chocolate, and Jax all end up turning and start chucking as many grenades at this thing as they can. Because this thing is technically a fighter vehicle, and we're a bunch of ground troops. This thing can very easily take us out if it actually could get to us. But we're raining down so much explosives on it that it's having a hard time. Well, a couple of the grenades get really, really close and end up blowing up part of its feet, so now it's limping around towards us, and it keeps going Waka, Waka, Waka with every single step, trying to get at us. Eventually, Farah and Jax both throw grenades, and both of us ended up having to spend a luck point to throw the grenades into its mouth while it's doing Waka Waka. And boom! This thing takes a crap ton of damage. falls to the ground, pieces of metal and bone and flesh are dropping off of it. The interior looks like it's on fire. There's smoke coming out of it. It's very obviously done. Well, Monty, he's kind of sad about this, and he starts walking up to the walker, like with his hand out, going like, "Oh no, my creation is destroyed." The problem is, this thing is still moving a little bit. Well, it was definitely dying, and as Monty gets up to it, this walker, kind of moves around a little bit, looks directly at Monty, and goes, "Daddy," before it just stops moving. It died. Yeah, needless to say, we ended up ripping him a new one for that one. But after all the destruction and everything, we kind of decided that, now would be a good time to leave the base. So Farah heads on over to her fighter and finds it completely torn apart. The walker, while stomping around the base, went right through her section of the hangar and tore her R-wing into little bitty pieces. So Farah is pretty devastated over this. The R-wing was the first of its kind, given to her by her father. She was supposed to take care of it, and now this monstrosity has just completely obliterated it. So yeah, she's pretty sad. But the issue is we still need to get to the city and rescue the cadets. So that does mean that we need to take at least 2 transports, because we need to get all the cadets into the transports if we're going to have a chance to leave here. So what ends up happening is Farah and Chocolate end up taking Lazy Leafs, while Deeze ends up piloting the second transport. And the reason why we did that is because, one, Farah is actually much better at being a fighter pilot than Deeze was, and Deeze is actually more just a combat pilot, so he can pretty much fly whatever. So Jax is also what's considered a combat pilot. He can fly whatever, but he's not a specialized fighter pilot. So it comes down to Jax and Deeze have to fly the 2 transports. And we ended up letting Chocolate and Farah fly the Lazy Leafs, because we do need some sort of air escort just in case we get attacked. We don't want to be caught blindsided and not have them there to help us out, which actually helped us out in the end. So Ashe and Bob get on the transport with Deeze, and Thessia, Lilly, and Monty get on the transport with Jax. Now, these transports, they're armed with a chain gun in the nose, which is controlled by the pilot or the gunner, whichever one is set up properly. And then they do have 2 side turrets, which are operated by personnel inside. The really, really good transports that are just hulked out and meant for war, those ones are actually armed with missile pods and external combat drones and much more guns and much heavily armored. Those ones can take a freaking beating and keep flying. These ones are literally meant for going from point A to point B, so they are armed with bare minimum armor and bare minimum weaponry. Just enough to teach cadets how to fly and how to shoot the transports. But then we run into the issue with the Lazy Leafs. The Lazy Leafs are fighters that are meant for training. They're not meant for actual combat. They're meant to teach people how to fly a fighter. And the main difference is the Lazy Leafs are very, very agile. They can turn on a dime. But the drawback is they're not very fast. And because they are training fighters, the ammunition and weapons that they're carrying is not as powerful as something like the R-Wings, which could take out another fighter pretty damn easily. These Lazy Leafs, they're really going to have to work to take on an enemy combatant. So, we get all the supplies loaded up, we get everything that we wanted, and we take off. and start heading towards the city, which is a couple hundred, or no, I'm sorry, like 58 miles, 60 something miles away. And as we're flying, our DM has us do a perception roll. Everybody got the basic one. The basic one is there is a very, 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 very large storm cell approaching the city. Right now, it is over the ocean, but it is coming close. And as we are looking at this thing, we can see lightning shooting down. We can see heavy rains. We can see the water on the ocean being churned and stirred. And oh, this looks like it's going to be a tropical storm, if not a hurricane. The only thing that's lacking is the cyclone at the middle. So when we do get to the city, we've got to find a place to land fairly quickly. Otherwise, we're going to be caught up in this, which is not good because the lazy leaves will get knocked out of the air, the transports will get slammed around, and the chances of us successfully landing safely are going to be slim to none. So yay, we get to haul ass. Those with the higher perception got to witness this. Coming out of the clouds and descending down upon us is a squadron of Andrazi forces, or Andrazi fighters. We count 6, there may be more. So, yay, we now get to experience our first little round of vehicle-based combat, which is what Star Fox is all about. So, combat went something like this. As we're looking at the fighters, they notice us and start making a beeline directly for us. And as they're coming at us, what they ended up doing was splitting off into 2 different groups, and both of them forming a 3-person triangle, or 3-fighter triangle, and coming right for our center. We already guessed that they're trying to split us in half, and so we end up flying closer together, trying to tighten it up so that they cannot split us apart. Well, what ends up happening is the 2 nose guys end up targeting our lazy leafs and taking them on, while the 2 outer guys end up focusing on the transports. Now, the lazy leafs, that was a pretty interesting combat. Basically, they went toe-to-toe, firing weapons at each other. All sides got hit. All sides took some damage. But the Andrazi forces were going so fast, they blew past the lazy leafs. And here's the issue. The lazy leafs can turn on a dime. So they did. And as the Andrazi forces are blowing past them, the lazy leafs are keeping the guns on the fighters. And so they're getting torn to pieces while flying through the middle of this group. The lazy leafs then turn and start chasing the Andrazi fighters, shooting them the entire time. Now here's the kicker. The Andrazis cannot turn around and shoot back because they're going so fast. But the ammunition from the lazy leaf is able to catch up and hit them. So they're trying to bank and do all these crazy maneuvers to try and get back behind the lazy leaves, but it's not working. Because the lazy leaves are just like, oh, I'm just going to slow down even more and just follow you around like I'm a turret, and you can't really do anything about it. They literally picked these fighters to pieces, point by glorious point, until they explode. And it was kind of glorious watching this happen. Now, the transports is where the really odd combat ended up going. Because Deeze was flying one of the transports, he's trying to get a feel of how it should fly. So he's banking left, he's banking right, he's trying to do a barrel roll. And all of us are sitting there like, why are you trying to do a barrel roll, buddy? One, you're in atmosphere with passengers on board. And on top of that, that ship is not meant for something like that. You can definitely try, and you can most likely succeed, but you're also going to be putting a shit ton of stress on your plane's fuselage. probably don't want to be doing that. And he rolled his intelligence and realized, yeah, that was kind of a bad idea. And ended up correcting his flight. All the while that's happening, Ashe and Bob are strapped into the turrets, just fucking laying waste to the two fighters that were attacking them. And I swear, it was hilarious because they'll get target lock and then Deeze banks away and they lose target lock. And then he tries to do a barrel roll and they both get target lock on the same one. And then they straighten out and lose it again. Finally, Bob had enough and managed to shoot down both of the fighters that were attacking their ship. And over a freaking Wi-Fi receiver, I get from him, "Can you please tell your pilot to knock this shit off? This is ridiculous." Now, Jax is flying the second transport, and he has Monty and Lilly and Thessia on board. Now, Thessia really wasn't a combatant in this thing, so she pretty much just got strapped in and told, hang on. Monty took up one of the turrets, and Lilly took up one of the turrets. And they're doing pretty good. Monty's getting some shots here, Lily's getting some shots there. But for the most part, Jax is kind of flying in such a way that he's trying to line up shots for them, but it's just not working out right. And eventually, they actually do enough damage to bring down one of the fighters, which is a good thing, because all we have is one left. About this time is when the two fighters get shot down from the Lazy Leaves, and in about a minute or so, the other two will be getting shot down too. So we are sitting here trying to bank left, trying to bank right, trying to keep out of this guy's line of fire, all while trying to turn and get our turrets lined up with him. And it's just not working. It's being a pain in the ass. Well, after a couple minutes of this, the only fighter that's left is this one. And he keeps rolling really, really high for his piloting skill and managing to keep away from our line of fire. Lilly had had enough. Her player decided to spend a couple of luck points and use some psychic powers of hers to do something truly horrifying. She reached out with her mind and forced this other guy's brain to explode. Blood and guts completely covered the cockpit. They started flying straight because, autopilot and, all that good fun stuff. So it's flying straight. One of our Lazy Leafs flies up next to it, sees the blood and gore, and just goes, huh. Okay, then. Hey, guys. I don't know what happened, but this guy's dead. And his fighter's kind of flying off into the sunset here. I don't think there's a city or anything that direction. Should we take this thing out or just kind of leave it be? And we're all like, just leave it alone. It'll fly off into oblivion. Because we get more important things. About this time, we start getting hit by the rain. And we're still a good 30 minutes out from the city. Which means that the next half hour is going to be a pain in the ass to get to the city and even find some place to land. So, we're all thinking and trying to come up with a solution, going, you know what, we could probably just park on top of a building. Yeah, no, we can't because the wind will knock off the transports. Okay, well, why don't we just find a street? Well, if we find a street, that means that our transports are not going to be protected, and we're going to have the Andrazi on top of us almost immediately. Well, can we find an alleyway? Well, no, we can't do that, because if we find an alleyway, the Lazy Leaves can sit down, but not our transports. Like, we got to find something big, open, secure, has a large, flat area, has some walls, and then it kind of dawned on us. We need to look for a baseball or a football stadium and pray that the roof is open. Luckily, we find one. and the door and the roof is open. So we land, grab like one duffel bag of the supplies because some of us got bumped and hurt and need to get healed up. And we decide that we're going to go to one of the team locker rooms and bunk down for the night and kind of get out of the storm. So we lock down the fighters, we lock down the transports. We haul ass inside trying to get out of the rain. We find the locker room and we set everything down. Kind of do one of those, yay, we are out of the rain, we're out of the bullshit, we're gonna take a rest and hopefully get on this tomorrow. However, we need to do a rec of the facility here to see if, one, it is actually secure, and two, if we are alone here or not. So, Shucklet, Deeze, and Jax decide that we're going to go on a patrol. The rest of the people, everybody else can stay here in the locker room and kind of relax and get their bearings and just kind of collect themselves. Okay, so Jax, Deeze, and Shucklet all decide that we're going to do a patrol rec around the stadium to make sure that we are alone and that the stadium is in fact secure. So we clear out the first level, and as we're making our second loop around the stadium, we get up to the second level where all the fans go to go use the bathroom, to get food and whatnot. And as we're making a pass around one of the corners, Jax hears something coming from one of the men's restroom. This is where the story gets really, really dark. He walks in and finds a rat folk inside, pleasuring himself with the head of another rat folk. Now, I'm playing as Jax, and when I see this, I don't want anything to do with him. So what I end up doing is walk over, grab this rat folk by the throat, drag him over to a janitor's closet, throw him in there, close and lock the door, and then I break the door handle off so that he cannot get out. I don't want to waste my ammunition on him. I don't want to waste the power that it's going to take to turn my scythe on to cut him in half. He's just not worth it. So after locking the door, I turn around and leave. We continue on the patrol, and eventually we find ourselves in the top deck area. And we find ourselves standing right outside of the announcer's box. And we open the door, go walking inside, and we notice that there is a lot of radio broadcast equipment in here. So we start fiddling around with it, and we decide that, you know what, we're going to bunk down here tonight. Let's set up a radio beacon that will be on a continuous loop, and that way we can, so that we can broadcast to our cadets and hopefully bring them to the stadium. So we ended up deciding to go with the message of, for those who worship the god of death, meet your supervisors at the stadium for a ritual sacrifice. Basically, it was a, hey, anybody who remembers the god of death, the little sketch graffiti that the Hyena Brothers made of Jax, which all the cadets saw and all the instructors saw, should kind of clue them in that, oh, hey, these people are at the stadium. We might want to go there. But we set it up to broadcast over and over and over again. And Chocolate and Jax decide that we're going to head back to the locker room where everybody else is at, while Deeze decides that he's going to stay up here for the rest of the night. He's going to lock the door behind us and make sure that this is constantly broadcasting. That way, in the morning, he can turn it off and hopefully not attract the attention of the Andrazi. So Jax and Chocolate head back on downstairs. When we get down there, we find that the rest of the group has kind of taking over this locker room, and when we walk in, it's actually a pretty nice little setup. They got plenty of couches, chairs set up so that you can recline, relax, lay down, get some sleep. They also have a kitchen off to the side where Bob is actually cooking something that he found in there for the rest of our organic crew to eat. Then there's a back room that has a bathroom and a separate section that has like a bathroom or a bathtub / sauna area. And Jax and Bob are both kind of eyeing that up because we have been up for roughly 30 some odd hours. Both me and him severely need to vent our systems, or we're going to start having some serious issues. When it comes to the robots, I think I may have explained it before, but I'll explain it again. We build up heat, like a lot of heat. And if we go for more than, I think it's 23 hours, our systems start to overheat and we start having memory loss issues. So basically, we can actually die from this. So typically the robots will go find a location away from everybody else and they will vent their systems, which is basically like we're putting our coolant over the hottest areas and we have just steam erupting from our bodies. During this time, our computer CPU is doing a memory save and download and then purging all the information that is not needed or required for further operations. It's basically like a defrag on your normal computer. Now, this vent can be interrupted. However, we need to continue it sometime within the next 6 to 8 hours. Otherwise, that damage and defrag process will actually start corrupting our systems. And robots have been known to kind of go nutso whenever they're forced to stay up and forced to overheat like that. It's not good. But yeah, anyways, so Jax and Chocolate walk in, and Bob immediately hands Chocolate a plate of food and is like, "Here, you need to eat, you need to get something to drink, and you need to relax and recover. We're going to start taking shifts, and all of you need to get some sleep." While at the same time, he comes up to Jax and hands Jax a box. And inside this box are these little silver balls. Now, this is the equivalent of robot food. And basically what it is it's a steel ball that has a lot of metal shavings and coolant inside. What the robots will do is they actually have effectively a robotic stomach, per se. It's basically a port where they open up a slot, put the ball inside, or in some cases of the more advanced robots, they can actually put it into their mouths and quote unquote swallow it, trying to emulate human beings or humanoids. But it goes to their coolant system, and what happens is the coolant inside gets added to the reservoir, and the metal shavings from this actually will go through their systems and find microfractions in the lines, and it will plug those holes and basically reseal any coolant line. So Bob hands Jax a few of those. Jax thanks him, and we start setting up shifts, like who's gonna be on first, who's gonna be on second watch, and we all bunk down for the night. And this storm hit us hard. Like, we're in the middle of this giant concrete stadium, and we can hear the wind just howling. We can hear the rain pounding on the outside of the stadium. I mean, this is definitely a hurricane by now. So everybody's trying to stay warm, stay comfy, and get some sleep. And then, as Jax and Bob are about to head off to the sauna to do their venting, they both notice something. Thessia and her little Psyduck, they're both curled up to Ashe. like hugging onto her very tightly. We've got a feeling that Thessia may actually be bonding to Ashe now. Which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, we don't really know yet. But we both make note of it and proceed to go into the sauna. Chocolate had first watch. So for the first 3 or 4 hours, he's up all night while we're sitting there in the back room venting. He then goes and gets Bob. Bob takes the second watch, and he wakes up, goes throughout the night, doesn't really notice anything, no big deal. He comes and wakes me up. I take the third watch. And third watch is around 4 a.m., basically the witching hour. This is where things get a little creepy. So Jax is sitting in the quote-unquote living room area where all the couches and chairs are at. And he's just looking around, making sure everything's kosher, everything's fine. Goes up to the door, he'll wiggle the door and make sure it's nice and locked. Nothing's getting in, nothing's getting out. Goes back, stands in the corner, just continues observing, being the good sentry bot that he is. Something gets his attention. There is another person in this room that is not supposed to be. And they're walking out of the bathroom. And Jax is watching this guy, and he is walking. He looks like a football player, like one of the old school football players. But as he's walking, Jax notices he's walking through some of the couches. This guy is a ghost. Jax looks at him. The ghost kind of looks back at him. They acknowledge each other. Jax does the whole typical male nod your head down. Guy does the same. And just walks right out through the doors. And when I say through the doors, I mean the doors were still bolted shut, and he just phased right through them. Jax takes a mental note on this. Goes, might have to talk to the psychic personnel here, figure out what the hell is going on. But I got no hazard warnings. I got no feelings that he was going to harm anybody. So I'm going to let it slide, and I'll say something about it in the morning. No point waking up the group just to freak them out. A couple hours goes by, his shift is done. He goes and wakes up, I believe it was Ashe at this point. It was Monty. He goes and wakes up Monty. Monty takes the last shift, which is only like an hour or two, while Jax goes and finishes doing his vent. Well, the issue is with Jax is he did not get a chance to properly vent, so he ends up waking up like 2 hours after everybody else. And by the time he wakes up, the sun is up. Everybody is awake. They're having breakfast, kind of getting everything together. All the organics have taken a shower. Bob is up and awake, and he's moving around doing his thing, kind of protecting Ashe and being, the great stellar butler that he is. Jax was walking out, sees the group, and says, all right, I need to speak to Ashe and Lilly. And kind of brings them off to the corner and explains to them what he saw that night. And then actually loads a video file of it to Bob. Bob is like, what the hell is this? And is freaking out a little bit. Ashe then explains to us, back about 80 years before, there was a football team that came through here. And they had a very, very strong player who accidentally broke the neck of the quarterback. The quarterback lived long enough to be wheeled into the locker room, where he promptly died. And it is rumored that the stadium is haunted by not just him, but by several ghosts. We're just lucky to happen to see only him. So yay, we're all now freaked out a little bit, but hey, whatever. Now, we switch up to Deeze. Deeze wakes up because he is hearing a knocking on the door right outside of the stadium booth. It's not us. All of us are still downstairs. We don't know what the hell is going on. So he wakes up and he walks over to the door and he rolls for instinct. And he gets a bad feeling, just like I'm not liking this. This is a bad feeling. So he goes over to one of the side windows and kind of cracks a blind, just the slightest bit, to look out and see who is standing outside the door. There's 4 Andrazi soldiers standing at the door with rifles drawn, aimed at the door and at the window, preparing to breach. He very quickly books it as quietly as he can to the front of the booth where he can look out upon the stadium. There's no 6 transports. About 14 Andrazi fighters all have landed. The transports all had about 30 soldiers, and this place is absolutely crawling with Andrazi soldiers. And as he looks, they're now going through the supplies that we brought from the base, and they're dispersing them. We just lost everything. We have a guy trapped upstairs. The main group, is still downstairs, completely unaware of this situation. And we are completely down our transports and our fighters. We have no clue what's about to hit us. And that's where we close the game for that night. So, I'm going to leave you guys in suspense, as we were left in suspense. Y'all have a great day or night. Hug your loved ones. Keep the dice rolling. Have a great day.